gidiyoruz. Peki doğrulamak da önemli değil mi? Şimdi de uzaklardan bir konuşmacımız var. Kendisi girişimcilik araştırmacısı ve eğitimci Dr. Nettra Pan. Güvenin ama Doğrulayın temalı konuşmasıyla bizlerle olacak.
In 1992, a 16-year-old young man moved from the Ukraine to the United States. He was poor at the time, living on food stamps, and missed his family back home. He wanted a secure way to communicate with them. Flash forward, about 17 years later, he ended up starting a company that was focused on secure messaging. The company was focused on privacy because this co-founder recalled growing up in a country with a secret police. So every message that passed through the data centers was deleted after it was delivered. And later, when the company was bought for $16 billion, plus $3 billion in stock, the founders worked together to implement clauses that would prevent the parent company from introducing monetization techniques that were not in line with the co-founders' principles. Now, you might guess by my story that I'm talking about WhatsApp, that was purchased by Facebook in one of the largest, actually the largest, acquisition of a venture-backed company to date. This story doesn't stop here. Actually, one of the co-founders ended up leaving Facebook over disagreements on how user identities would be linked across Facebook products, as well as how WhatsApp would eventually be monetized, a decision that cost him $850 million. He decided to leave 1 year before his shares had fully vested, and as a result, would not receive the full stock amount that was stipulated in the acquisition deal. Now, what I found really fascinating about this story was, could this have been prevented somehow if the founders had done something differently when they first started out? Were there business models or partners that they could have worked with in order to ensure that they could continue infusing their personal values and societal objectives alongside creating commercial revenue? My name is Nettra Pan, and I'm a researcher and educator based in Paris, France. In my research, I try to understand how for-profit firms resolve tensions between societal goals and commercial goals. And today, I want to share with you some findings from one of my studies on social mission-driven VCs. This study is part of a larger data collection effort, which I've carried out throughout the last 10 years, notably speaking to over 200 equity investors at different stages, including some that are self-identified as socially mission-driven, and others that are traditional venture capitalists. And in total, I've analyzed about 5,000 investment decisions. Why have I taken this approach? Well, once again, I thought maybe I could find the answer to what went wrong in WhatsApp's case, for example, by going back to the beginning. And so I wanted to borrow the perspective of these early stage investors, and which early stage investors would better provide a window into resolving social and commercial tensions than socially driven VCs. Now, let me tell you a little bit about social mission-driven VCs, or social VCs for short. There are three things to know. First, these VCs are growing in number, and they're also growing in terms of the number of assets that they have under management. So in the last 10 years, we estimate that they have raised about $27 billion. These VCs can be found in the US and North America, in Europe, as well as in other places around the world, although the trend did originate in North America. The second thing to know about social VCs is that they are equity investors seeking investments in early stage ventures. And as such, they see hundreds of ventures per month. I thought that I could get an interesting perspective into how to navigate social and commercial tensions by talking to these experts that see hundreds of ventures per month. And the last thing to note is that these VCs actually expect financial returns from their investments, as well as progress towards social or environmental metrics. Their reputation relies on this, as well as, in some cases, financial remuneration. So in some cases, some funds have been set up so that partners don't earn their carry unless the ventures they invested in also achieved their social or environmental goals. And so these three characteristics combined made it that I might understand a little bit better how for-profit firms resolve social and commercial tensions. And what I found was quite surprising. So I did a deep dive into a social VC based in Western Europe that asked not to be named. They're a registered B Corp, and they say on their website that they seek to achieve social outcomes as well as outsized financial returns. So I did a deep dive into this social VC. I looked at their investment decision-making process, and I found that they actually did some specific things to help reduce trade-off hazard. By trade-off hazard, I mean to help reduce the chances that the venture would eventually down the line need to prioritize commercial outcomes over social outcomes or social outcomes over commercial outcomes. I've highlighted 3 findings to share with you today due to time constraints. And because the theme of this conference is trust, I framed my findings around the popular phrase, trust but verify, that was popularized during the Cold War when talking about the Interrange Nuclear Missile Treaty and the 10 years of mandatory on-site compliance tests that Russia and the United States decided to implement in order to verify compliance with the treaty. So I'm going to start first with the first finding, which I have changed from trust but verify to verify that trust. The first finding I want to share with you is the type of verification this social mission-driven VC carries out when evaluating its ventures for the first time. So let me read you this quote from an interview I had with one of the investors from the firm. He's talking about a venture that employs marginalized women, particularly women who have survived human trafficking. And they employ these women in a retail business. He says, I saw them 3 times in 2 weeks trying to understand what they were trying to achieve, because key for me was, are they really wanting to change women's lives, or is it just the hook? The VC in this quote talks about how he challenges them. He says, but that's not very scalable, right? When you hit a few million in revenue, you'll abandon that, right? And what he's trying to see is if the venture will defend the purpose of their venture early on, such as, no, I don't think that's the case at all. That's core to what we do. And what the social VC is trying to figure out is whether the venture has conviction in what they're trying to do. And so I call one of the first findings of how this social VC evaluates ventures and tries to reduce trade-off hazards, verify, and then trust. They verify specifically in this case the founder's commitment to a social cause. The next finding I want to share with you is named verify the vehicle. So in this finding, we move from verifying the founder's motivation to actually verifying the engine that is running the founder's business. And the way this VC does this is by seeing if the venture has a mutually reinforcing revenue model that combines both social and commercial outcomes. So in this example that I'll share with you, the VC is analyzing a venture that offers last mile delivery, but also wants to achieve a social goal of integrating people with disabilities into the economic workforce. And what the social VC tries to do is they try to make a business case for the social cause. Why does employing people with disabilities make sense from a business perspective? But after reflection, they see that in this very competitive space of last-minute delivery, price and service are everything, and this particular social cause doesn't reinforce the economic goal. Let me share with you an example that actually worked and that led the VC to eventually invest in this venture. Here you're looking at a slide from a venture that offers a software and hardware solution that helps industrial kitchens reduce food waste. And what's really interesting about this case is that, although the venture charges $7,000 upfront for the installation, after that, they actually base their revenues off of how much recurring food cost is saved. So here you see a really interesting case where the offer that they have created actually solves an environmental problem. And more than that, they will be remunerated based on how well they perform on solving that environmental problem. On the other side, and this is a bonus because it doesn't always exist in all social ventures, the client is incentivized to reduce food waste due to their focus on the bottom line as well. The client is trying to reduce costs. And so what you have here is moving beyond the founder motivation and moving towards creating a model that performs or is evaluated based on its performance on a social environmental goal. So in this case, we're moving actually beyond trusting the founder to verifying whether their business model is mutually reinforcing. So it's beyond trusting the pilot of a plane and actually going towards verifying if the vehicle will get them there. And then the last finding that I want to share with you, I've called trust the process. So even after trusting and verifying, actually, you might find that the verification of the engine has failed. And what do you do when that happens? Let me read you a few quotes from this venture that is evaluated by the VC. So in this case, you're looking at a venture that provides doctors with a way to more easily find patients and more easily deal with administrative paperwork. And what happened here was that the social VC was concerned that this on-demand app proposed by the venture would actually take doctors away from social situations where the doctors were needed. So in some countries, there's a shortage of doctors, and so by having an on-demand app that would allow people to pay a premium to have doctor appointments, you would actually take away doctors from much-needed emergency services. And so what this VC tried to do is figure out whether there were specific geographies where this venture would succeed. And so what they did was they sent an Excel sheet back and forth. They worked closely, and then eventually they decided, based on the market response, to invest in the venture. And so what's really interesting here is that the VC and the founder trusted each other, but more importantly, they trusted the process and they did the verification of the vehicle, of the venture together, and they built it together. So what's really important, what I would love for you to take away here is that trusting and verifying shouldn't be at opposite ends of the spectrum. Actually, you need trust in each other and in the process in order to do new things. This social VC space is a new space where there are not established revenue models and not established social models that scale. And so you need to have trust in order to explore different outcomes. And you see here, the social VC was willing to suspend disbelief and suspend their doubts and actually help this venture as much as possible. And that led to a positive investment outcome, an investment decision for both the venture and the VC, creating an investment opportunity that wasn't there before. So you can see by trusting the process, verifying the founder commitment, and working together to find an outcome that suits everyone, this socially driven VC not only increased the slice of the pie, they increased the overall size of the pie that they were able to pick and choose from when selecting promising venture investments. And so the takeaway that I would give to founders that are thinking of starting a venture based on a personal conviction, personal value, is surround yourself with trusted partners, willing partners, and competent partners with both expertises that are able to push you along. So we actually go back to the WhatsApp situation. Brian Acton, who walked away from $850 million, he's now found another co-founder, and together they've started the Signal Foundation. So this is a nonprofit organization. It's a model that suits their goals, and they have surrounded themselves with people who would support their mission. And so this is the takeaway that I would love to leave with you. And thank you very much for listening.
Doktor Nettra Pan'e teşekkürlerimizi sunuyoruz. Bu ufuk açıcı konuşması için ayrıca teşekkür ediyoruz.